All right, it's another one of these Homeric Rhapsody things. I wanted to try a different thing this time. We've been doing a bunch of these episodes where I basically tell my living version of the Iliad, the story that we know in the modern era as the Iliad, which is more or less a set story. There's differences in every translation, but the general thing is the same every time. But Homer might not have seen it that way, and he was probably adding episodes and things, all the way through the line, especially when he went to a different city to tell the story again. And if there was like a part that was like agreeable to that city, adding Menestheus's deeds and when he goes to Athens or something like that. So I thought it would be interesting. This is not in chronological order from what we've been doing, where we're in what's currently known as Book 8, but I figured I would kind of add an episode uh, and see if I can retain some of the Homeric style that I've been trying to uphold. So I don't know if I'll just, do this and abandon it after an episode, or if I'll really try to get to the whole end of this, like, cycle that I would be creating, but we'll see. I don't want to, get too far ahead of myself. Let's give it a shot. Oh, so the only thing I have idea-wise for what this would be, is that it would be telling the story of when Achilles sacks this town of eastern Thebes, the Eëtion's town, the town of the father of Andromache, Hector's wife. And now, O Muse, sing to me a story from times past, all the way before those deeds of Achilles and Agamemnon which brought them to so much strife. Back during the second year of that great war at Troy, the initial fighting had died down, the men's anger had cooled, and those Achaeans had set up their camp firmly at the shores of Troy, blocking all sea trade from coming in, but not preventing outside cities from the landward side to enter that well-gated town. And thus many were doing so, and every day, as the sun of Helios's chariot set, more and more doughty fighters were streaming in from all the cities of the land, great Dardania and far-off Lycia land, and all of the towns and cities, great and small, from lands around the Troad, were pouring into the city with more and more companies of men. For many were the allies of Priam, that great eastern king, with his 50 sons, all doughty and strong, and chiefest among them Hector, who was out recruiting and bringing in as many reinforcements as he could. Thus were the Achaeans in a favorable position to prevent Troy from reaching their greatest monetary income. All that sea trade which had to pass through that watery way into their city was blocked off. But this was a strategy that would take a long time, and they must wait and prevent those ships from coming in, but not much more could they do now, as the Trojans sat behind their walls and picked off any comers with arrows, those walls indestructible, built by the great earth shaker who encircles the earth. Thus did crafty Odysseus lead companies far off out into the lands of the Troad, and so did great Diomedes, that youngest of all the fighters, who had joined those armies of Agamemnon. Youngest, that is, except for Achilles. Achilles it was who would go and had the plan to raid another city on his own, for many of the captains would team up their contingents to besiege a city or to take it by force and raze it to the ground. For each local town that had been destroyed or prevented, and all its men and young boys slain or thrown from the ramparts, every one of those cities that had been destroyed by the Achaeans, with their crops burned and their resources plundered, would not be able to reinforce those hardy Trojans. And so the men ranged forth, with many contingents staying at the Achaean camp, but others spending months away on scouting parties and raids. The only one of these forces that would go out on its own was Achilles and his Myrmidons, who was now at the council of those great leaders of Troy, presenting his raiding party's plan. And that leader Agamemnon spake to all them who were assembled. Great Idomeneus of Crete, with Meriones his attendant standing by, Sthenelus standing in for the Argives, whose captain Diomedes was off on a scouting party. That one Eurybates, who was the attendant of Odysseus and crier, was standing and committing as much to memory as he could to report back to his captain all that had been said that day, though he held no status to offer his opinion at council. And Salaminian Ajax, that son of Telamon, and Locrian Ajax, the swift runner, as well as many captains besides. And finally was Achilles, preeminent in beauty and preeminent in stature, though he was but a lad, only 15, having just come from the halls of Skyros, where his mother had reared him and had him brought up by the king in that land. Among all the beautiful women who sat under those walls, Achilles had come with his Myrmidons, and Agamemnon, who had heard many a tale of his valor and his fighting spirit, wanted to put it to the test. He spake, "All ye captains here assembled, I propose that another party be sent out to take eastern Thebes, which stands 6 days' march from the city of Troy. This will be a tough target for any who might take it on, for it is where King Eëtion and his queen Tecmessa, both they sit, and both are doughty fighters and leaders of men and companies in the field. For it is their tradition that both the men and women will lead armies forth ahead of them, just as those fearsome Amazons do farther into the east. Yea, they may have been trained by such women, though they are not hating of the male race as the Amazons are. I propose that one go to this city and cut off their forces, for 6 great captains have they, the sons of that king and queen, the brothers of the princess of Troy. Thus shall we be greatly in need of a great force to go out. Now who will do this thing?" And Agamemnon, knowing that he could prick up the fighting spirit of Achilles, he added even more fuel to the fire, challenging that man who was not yet grown into manhood, and whose face still had not the wisp of a beard. He spake, "This is no boy's work, So I will not hear from any who are not senior among you. We have many great captains here who have proven themselves over and over in the field, and I will personally pour honors upon any who can bring me back the heads and armor of these great princes of Eëtion's town. Much plunder is there, and beautiful women, and, though I have heard it only second-hand, there sits the captured attendant of that king of Thebe. Yes, he who sat by the right arm of Peleus, the great Argonaut, that wise old counselor, Phoenix, who was once a leader of Myrmidons or Phthians, and gave his counsel and his advice to that great king throughout many a year. And before he could say any further, that young boy sat up, who was already as tall as any of the other fighters in that council. And he said, I will hear of none other going to this place. I know I am young, but youngness in years, a lack of experience in the battlefield, this counts for nothing compared to the rage that I feel in my heart. I have not seen that great, wise old Phoenix for 2 years now, and I had thought him dead when we had left and we had gone to Aulis, and we had not seen him in the congregation there. I had feared the worst, and only now do I find out like this, king of men. Do you tell me that he is alive? Well, I have sharp words for you later, who would give me such news in so public a place. But this is for another time. I will go with my great Myrmidons, the men of the ant armor. Black and hard are the scales that surround their flesh, and the rage that curtains me is blacker than all. Yea, I will slay these 6 sons of Eëtion and Queen Tecmessa, and I will bring the both of them back here. Or if you ask me, great Lord Marshal Agamemnon, I shall slay the 2 of them where they stand. This will be done by no other captain in accompaniment to me, but myself alone. Such is the importance of this man Phoenix to me, and I will hear no argument from any. Thus spake the great soon-to-be captain of the Myrmidons, asking for his first major mission in that conflict after the open fighting on the beaches of Troy. And though he had but a bit of experience and had shown himself valiant in the fight, it would not be until this moment that he truly became preeminent in the field. All right, interesting. It is kind of fun to come up with a new piece of the story. So to give you an idea here, that anybody who doesn't know the Iliad, this is not a part of the Iliad. It's referenced in the Iliad. There's a couple of small little pieces where they mention that Achilles sacked the town of Eëtion, which is the place where Andromache, the wife of Hector, came from. And there's a few other pieces which I guess I won't mention too much about because we'll maybe hear it when I tell it as a story. But what I just had the thought of a minute ago, before doing this video, just so you have a full idea of what level of preparation I'm doing for these, I never come up with the story beforehand, or like write down notes or try to figure out like what's connected to what. But I thought it would be interesting if I've been reading the Irish Celtic story of Cú Chulainn when he's at the Cattle Raid of Cooley, the Toinbu Colinga, I think it's called. And so I thought it'd be interesting. Robert Graves has this big giant web of theories that all, all cultures, legends of different heroes are pretty much the same story that somehow got disseminated through all the different parts of the world. And a lot of people, not just Robert Graves, refer to Cú Chulainn, the great hero of Irish folklore, as being essentially another Achilles. Although he's a little bit more like a superhero, like a monster. Sometimes he's a man, sometimes, and sometimes he has like 7 fingers and 7 toes and like multiple pupils in the same eye and stuff. Um, but he has this great, huge story about him that's like the biggest tale in Irish legend. Um, and I was reading that story again, and I was like, this would be interesting to try and adapt it to become a story of Achilles. To do that thing Robert Graves was talking about in his huge work called The Greek Myths. Robert Graves does he tells the stories of the Greek myths, but then has these huge notes at the end of each one explaining how each culture potentially either derived their stories from each particular myth, or how the Greeks took their stories from some other culture's stories. And he has some pretty out there ideas, and a lot of them are like not that credible, but his kind of like, he has a lot of like confidence in his own ideas, even when they're like pretty out there. And it's really to be admired, I think. And I thought it would be cool to, in the style of what he's saying, like to do that, to basically just make up a story of Achilles that would then be derived from the story of Cú Chulainn. So I'm kind of setting up anybody who knows the story of that Cattle Raid of Cooley would kind of see where this is going, I guess. But there are some parts that might not really connect yet, so you'll see where this is going in the larger sense. But for anyone who's keeping track, I'm going to attempt to like imprint the story of that war between Ailill and Queen Maeve, who I just turned the queen of Eëtion's town into a fighting queen, which I'm pretty sure is, well, it's definitely not the way it is in the Greek stories. And I also invented this concept of Phoenix, the wise old counselor who brought up Achilles, would be captured, and that's kind of becomes like the reason that Achilles wants to go take the town of Eëtion. And also I came up with this idea separate from that, but I just thought it was a cool idea that I didn't even plan this, but I thought it was a cool idea that the Achaeans had blocked off the port, but they can't stop people from coming in from the other side, the landward side of Troy. And so all the cities are reinforcing Troy, and the reason they're going out and raiding is not just for plunder, which is kind of the implication in the Iliad, but is also so that they can proactively stop other cities from reinforcing Troy. And I wanted to do this thing where Achilles would be the lone fighter against all of the city of Eëtion, or his forces would be the only, there wouldn't be anyone reinforcing him as he fights against the whole city of Thebes. And this is not seven-gated Thebes, nor is it Egyptian Thebes. I'm pretty sure it's like a third one, which is Eëtion's Thebes. It's kind of confusing the way that all these different versions of Thebes, and I'm not even entirely sure it is Thebes, but I'm calling it Thebes, I guess. Seven-gated Thebes being the one on the other side of the ocean, where Diomedes and all of them took it after their fathers, Capaneus and Tydeus and all of them tried to take it previously, but couldn't, which is the story of a whole different thing. But it's not that one, and it's not Egyptian Thebes, which is supposed to have 100 gates, and it's like a zillion, it's like super rich or something. It's a different Thebes. But I thought it'd be interesting if I tried to do a new piece of material that is based on an old piece of material, but imprinting the characters onto it, which my understanding is that that's how a lot of the Iliad got composed in the first place. For example, Achilles was already a character, and Ajax was already a character before Homer like came up with the Iliad. But there was a lot of pieces of the story that he just made up out of nowhere. I'm pretty sure Patroclus was not in any of the like legend stuff that came before Homer. Ajax is like imprinted from an entirely different era of the world, which is denoted by a lot of the, historians talk about a lot of his armor and tactics and stuff that's like totally different and anachronistic compared to everybody else. There's like all these different pieces that like the idea of Thetis having saved Zeus, and then that's why he has to pay her a debt, is totally like Homer said, I need to have the reason why Zeus needs to honor Thetis. So he just came up with this thing of her like saving him from being like tied down by three of the gods or something. Which again, we just buy that. We take that as for granted that like that's how it goes in the Iliad. But you're not thinking about the fact that when Homer came up with it, it was like, okay, like where'd you get that idea from? It's just like out of nowhere. It's kind of like when Sam Raimi would do Spider-Man, and he just came up with the idea that Spider-Man shoots webs from his biological, arms. And it's like, okay, it works in the movie and it's a good movie, but you just came up with that out of nowhere. That's not even in the source material. And that's what it was like for people hearing Homer's stories, where it's like, you're telling a really good story, and so I will buy this, but it's not like, I also recognize that it's not necessarily what it is like written before that, or what the legends are. And so the idea that I'm like displacing a lot of stuff and like rewriting pieces of the story that don't necessarily even fit into Homer's version, although so far nothing has deviated so that it wouldn't fit back into the Iliad. But I think it's an interesting way to kind of try to experience what it was like for Homer trying to come up with these stories. And again, I'm not saying that my stuff is anywhere near that, which it will really probably never be. But I just, every time I do it, no matter how inept I am at doing it, I feel like I have a better understanding of what that process was like. So anyway, this is the first of, I would like to do more of these where we try to tell this story of the, cattle raid of Eëtion's town, or whatever we're going to call it. So we'll just keep going with that. Again, I'm doing all this to try and get better at writing off the top of my head the text that would end up being in the video game I'm working on. You can see the kind of like small version of the game, which is just sort of a loop of like roguelike style combat after combat after combat, which doesn't have a lot of text in it. But the next version of it, once I have the main mechanics figured out, would have a lot of text, and therefore I want to be able to come up with a lot of stuff off the top of my head. And story content, which, now we're starting to do as well. So, that game being based on the Iliad, I want to be able to do the stuff in the style of Homer. And that's what we're attempting. So, let's keep going with it and see how that turns out.